Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. David Crisafulli, testing 1, 2. You can go live, Deco.
All right, take it live, believe me.
Well, good morning everyone and welcome from Longreach, where we will spend the next couple of days listening to the local community. We're about to meet as Shadow Cabinet and then we have a briefing from the region's mayors, and I want to thank Rapid for all coming in to giving us a view of what are the challenges that they face and the opportunities for this magnificent part of the state. And already we've heard about the need for housing, law and order, health, similar issues that we've seen and felt across Queensland. But the goodwill of this community is one that they'll always put forward solutions as well as the challenges, and we want to thank everyone in Longreach for having us, and indeed from throughout the region in coming in as we spend the next few days listening to communities and the challenges they face. I want to start by addressing the cyanide scandal that is gripping this government. And there is no doubt that there is a cover-up of the highest order, and we are going to fight for the truth for every single person who deserves to know. The landholders, the environmental movement, the local councils, they all deserved to know. And there was a cover-up. We won't stop until we know why the Minister refused to release information that clearly she has had in her possession for a long time. In a moment, Sam O'Connor, our Shadow Environment Minister, will explain why the cyanide scandal is such a big deal and why the cover-up matters. And then our Shadow Integrity spokesperson, Fiona Simpson, will explain that this is a culture running through this government. But make no mistake, this is an issue that the government had full control and full knowledge of, and they didn't act. This is a cover-up. This is a cover-up of the highest order. And every Queenslander who values the environment and a long-term sustainable farming industry deserves a hell of a lot better. And we're going to prosecute this in the days and weeks ahead to find out why the Minister refused to make this information public. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, DC. Sam O'Connor, Shadow Minister for Environment. And it's great to be here in Longreach. Today we have seen some more concerning reports about the cyanide scandal on the Darling Downs. And what they show is that over the weekend, the Minister lied. She knew 18 months ago about this and was not upfront with Queenslanders. She was not upfront with the neighbouring landholders. And we're not talking about something small here. This is one of the worst environmental disasters our state has seen. This is cyanide levels 11 times higher than the allowable threshold. We've got benzene, a carcinogen, 25 times higher than the allowable threshold, leaking onto neighbouring properties. And the Minister knew 18 months ago and did nothing. For the Minister, this shows it was more about media management than environmental management. And that is not good enough. I mean, it's the Environment Minister's job to expose cover-ups like this, not to create them. So we want the Minister to be upfront with Queenslanders. That is the least that they deserve, especially after knowing for so long. Fiona?
Thank you, Sam. Do you want me looking right down the middle? Thank you. I want to talk about the cyanide scandal as well. The cyanide scandal is not only an integrity issue and a governance issue, it's a scandal that hurts potentially all Queenslanders because it exposes that this government's more interested in media management than keeping people safe and looking after the environment. The cyanide scandal is the mother of all cover-ups. This cover-up is damaging to the environment, it's damaging potentially to landowners and our food supply, but it's damaging also to the integrity of our government. This government has learned nothing after all the integrity issues that have been exposed, after the Longreach report and the recommendations. They have learned nothing. They are still covering up and not acting in the best interests of Queenslanders and in the best interests of the environment. I also want to address another issue which is certainly impacting across Queensland, and this is in the DV space. We only saw recently the Auditor General expose the fact that this government has had reports, it's had recommendations, and it has not acted to implement those recommendations in a transparent way in the DV space. There has been a major report. Nearly 12 months ago it was handed to the government, and they have not acted on one of the most critical recommendations, an urgent recommendation, which was for an independent implementation supervisor to drive the implementation of these essential DV recommendations to keep women safe, to address safety and justice issues in our community. Once again, the government's learnt nothing. They're more interested in saying they're going to implement reports and then doing nothing. It's now nearly 12 months, and this critical, this essential recommendation about an independent implementation supervisor to drive and implement these recommendations hasn't happened. We've heard the Attorney General get up and say she welcomes reports, and then they do nothing. And in the meantime, women's lives are at risk. I want to hand back now to the leader.
Thanks, Fiona. Thank you, Fiona. Who we got on the line?
All right, so we have a few people on the line. Marlena, if you could please ask your first question.
Hello. Just picking up what Fiona said about women's lives being at risk. Do you agree with that? And it was in May that the government officially accepted all of the recommendations. So what do you think about that timing? I know the report was out last December.
Thanks, Marlena. Announcements don't keep women and children safe. Actions do. And it's deeply troubling that this was one of the key recommendations that needed to be moved on swiftly. And to hear that the government won't be progressing until next year is deeply disappointing. Good governments plan, deliver and evaluate. They don't announce and walk away. And increasingly we're seeing this culture where it's all about the media announcement and never about the actual delivery. And all the press conferences and all the announcements in the world don't deliver for Queenslanders. Ministers who know how to administer a department do. And increasingly we're not seeing that from a third-term government that's more interested in its survival than delivering for the people who put them there.
Awesome. Marlena, do you have a second question?
Yeah, I've got a couple more. On the Commission of Inquiry report that's due into police responses to domestic and sexual violence, how quickly do you want to see that released? It's got to go to Cabinet, obviously.
We want a commitment for it to be released in full and for the government to set targets along the way to be measured against. We can't just have a situation where we get a series of recommendations and no one ever goes back and revisits them. We need to have accountability in all that we do, and Queenslanders deserve nothing less. And if reports are going to be released, well then the government has to give a series of recommendations that they will be held accountable to. Anything less suggests it's more about media management than ensuring that important recommendations are bedded down.
Marlena, do you have the next question?
I just have two final questions from our Wide Bay Bureau. Harvey Bay was up there with one of the worst in the state for the number of patients in emergency departments for 24 hours plus. They had 293 people in July for longer than 24 hours. How concerning is that? And in terms of ramping as well, ramping issues there?
We are seeing the pressures of the Wide Bay health system unravel before our eyes, and you can't blame staff. You can't blame COVID, you can't blame Canberra. The buck stops with the state government. And we have seen the decline in services throughout Queensland, and the Wide Bay is ground zero for many of these challenges. Imagine being the family of a young child waiting an entire day to be seen. Imagine being the family of an elderly person who just needs to be seen. There was a time when 24-hour waits were a major cause for alarm in Queensland hospitals. Well, it's now business as usual, including in places like Harvey Bay. And if ever you need proof of a health system that has been 7.5 years in decline, that is falling apart before our eyes because of a government that can't plan and deliver, well, these figures ring home so true. And it's deeply troubling for everyone who deserves a world-class health system, no matter where they live.
Do you have your next one, Marlena?
Yes, thank you. The final one against White Bay. Thanks to Blue is the name of a little girl who was discharged from Bundy Hospital with a clean bill of health, but then she had to be rushed to Brisbane for treatment and she died in the last few days. What needs to change at Bundaberg Hospital?
I haven't seen the reports, Marlena, so I'd be loath to comment individually, but I'll make this point. When you see the surgery waiting lists and the ambulance ramping figures at unprecedented levels in the Wide Bay, that's when pressures come to bear, and that's when Queenslanders become collateral damage. And that's why we keep putting forward our solutions, and one of the most important ones are putting local doctors and nurses back in charge. They are the ones that know their region better than anyone, and we're going to continue to fight for a health system where local people at the front line are determining where resources are spent and driving the change that's needed. We can't have a Brisbane knows best mentality when we're dealing particularly with regional areas who know what their community need.
Awesome. Now we also have Meg from Channel 9. Meg, do you have a question?
Hi, yes, I've just got a quick question on youth crime. We know Queenslanders are increasingly fed up with constantly being on high alert, scared of being targeted. Do you share their frustrations, and is change overdue?
We do, Meg, and we've even had it raised here in Longreach. We've had it across Queensland, and I'll make this point. The government watered down the laws 7 years ago, and we are living that nightmare now. The government made a deliberate change to make things easier for youth crims, and as a result we have a generation who know they are above the law and they are ripping communities apart. They're ripping communities apart in the far north, in the west, in the populated areas in the southeast. They know their way around the law. And we now have a situation where victims' rights are running second to the rights of the perpetrator. And that's when you know a system is broken. Don't blame the police. They are on the front line trying to do the best they can, but they haven't had the growth in their numbers they need, and they don't have the laws to back them up. And as a result, you have a generation of repeat youth offenders who know their way around the law, and they are laughing. They are putting things on social media. They know that there are not consequences for their behaviour. And until you have a system where there are consequences for action, you will continue to see the next generation rip communities apart. It starts with having breach of bail as an offence. It starts with having consequences for the actions of those repeat offenders and providing assistance for those early on in their journey of crime to turn them around. But until there are consequences for actions for repeat, habitual, hardcore youth offenders, you're going to have another generation destroying another lot of families. And we're better than that as a state.
The last one on the phone is Jacob Chico from Boston.
G'day, Jacob.
Do you have any questions, Jacob?
Thanks, Abby. David, just on the Guardian article that came out yesterday, should police officers be sacked on the spot if they're caught using vile racist language that we heard yesterday?
I'm very interested to see what comes from the Commission of Inquiry. That's very important. So let's see what falls out of that. But I'll make some points about that audio, those audio recordings, Jacob. It's hard not to listen to those and feel crook about it and feel deeply disappointed. And we're better than that as a state. And the police service are an incredible group of people who do an incredible group of work. And they will be as troubled as I am and as Queenslanders are from that. And there has to be consequences for that sort of behaviour, because you have to stamp out a culture where that occurs in any organisation. And the police service in this state is held in the highest regard for good reason. And it's vital that those who don't share the culture of the vast majority of officers are dealt with, and dealt with strongly.
Do you have any questions?
Just one more if I can.
Yes, Jacob?
Do you back the police commissioner to clean up the mess?
We've consistently said that the Commissioner deserves the opportunity to be able to reflect on the findings that come out of the inquiry and drive that change. And it's important that change is made. And I'll make this point very strongly. The vast majority of police officers are also demanding the change be driven. They don't want their reputation tarnished by those who are saying and doing the wrong thing. And that's why it's vital that that change is driven, and that we restore in the blue uniform the values and the pride that I share in the police service in this state. And that the vast majority of officers share. And we have to drive that change, and we have to reflect on the findings that come out of the inquiry and ensure that every Queenslander looks at that blue uniform and feels a debt of gratitude for their service and has the confidence in the police service that they deserve. Thanks, Jacob.
An audit has found at least 6 patients suffering from tuberculosis, including children, died after being referred away from Queensland health clinics back to PNG to seek treatment at hard-to-access and less equipped healthcare facilities. How concerning is this?
Yeah, again, without the specific details, I'm always loath to comment specifically, but I'll make this point. Throughout every element of our health system in Queensland, staff are under pressure, the likes of which they have never seen before, and they were under pressure before COVID. And there are consequences for a generation of underinvestment and a generation of removing power from the front line. And those consequences are individuals don't get the treatment they need. And that is as frustrating for the frontline doctors, nurses, paramedics, as it is for the families who are falling through the cracks. And every week, every single week, we have hundreds of reports from patients and frontline staff begging with us to drive the change that they need. And when people are being denied life-saving treatment because of underinvestment and a crumbling health system, you know we can do better. And it starts with empowering people at the front line and giving them the tools they need to keep Queenslanders safe.
Does there need to be an inquiry into the discovery of contaminants in groundwater outside the former Link project, and what the department knew and did not share?
Well, it's up to the Minister today to do a little more than read a pre-prepared statement that we saw in damage control on the weekend. This is a cyanide scandal, the likes of which we have never seen before, and it matters to every Queenslander who values the environment as well as integrity that we get to the bottom of it. The people who are impacted deserve to know, and there was a cover-up that prevented them knowing. And the Minister today has to come out and explain why she didn't drive the transparency and take Queenslanders into her trust. That is up to the Minister. And if the Minister doesn't do it today, well then we'll be asking her to do it tomorrow. This isn't going to go away. And so I say to the government, from the Premier down, there needs to be answers to what appears to be one of the great environmental cover-ups we have seen in an issue that matters. And the cover-up runs deep. Information of a cyanide scandal was kept from the landowners, from the local council, for those people who value the environment, and they deserve to know. And anything short of the Minister coming out and explaining why there was a cover-up and justifying her answers will only make our calls for transparency stronger.
And how disappointed are you that the domestic violence implementation body... Is it disappointing the domestic violence implementation body hasn't been established since the task force recommendations?
Very disappointing. It was one of the signature pieces of that report, and for the Minister not only to have failed to have done it already, but to then somehow suggest that next year is an acceptable time frame, that shows that it's more about the announcement than the delivery. Media conferences won't keep Queenslanders safe. Action will. And we're calling on that important position to be implemented immediately. It should have been done already, and anything short is a risk at a time when we need to drive change in the domestic and family violence space. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.